The city still slept beneath a bruised purple dawn as Conrad Hale sat in the penthouse office that overlooked everything he'd conquered and everything he was about to lose. A quiet ventilator hissed beside him, its tubing snaking under the collar of a bespoke jacket he was too proud to trade for a hospital gown. Down the polished corridor, cleaners ghosted between glass partitions, their carts rolling on whisper wheels. One of them, a woman in her late 20s called Solange, moved with a precision so practiced it felt invisible, replaced the orchid water, emptied the shredder bin, wiped the fingerprints no one else saw. Conrad watched her through the reflection on his floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights shimmering over her silhouette like static. Board members begged for 5 minutes, she never did. Yet her punctual arrival brought a strange comfort, proof that something in his unraveling empire still worked like clockwork. When the cardiologist's latest scan arrived on his tablet, a red-flagged prognosis stamped, terminal, 6 months, Conrad's grip tightened on the oxygen mask until his knuckles blanched. Outside, Solange adjusted a portrait of Conrad's father, angling it so the old man's steely eyes no longer glared at the door. Conrad's chest ached, not entirely from disease. He wondered, fleetingly, if anyone would angle his portrait when he was gone, or if dust would simply claim it. For a heartbeat he wished the quiet cleaner would look up, meet his gaze, maybe offer a word. But she stayed silent, stepping back into the corridor as daylight spilled across the marble floor, leaving him alone with the wheeze of machinery and the echo of everything unsaid. That afternoon, sunlight sharpened into hard rectangles across his mahogany desk when Conrad summoned Solange with a terse message, *penthouse. Now, she arrived still in uniform, navy polo, gray slacks, sensible shoes, hands folded, eyes lowered. No one else was present. Even his personal assistant had been waved away. Conrad's fingers hovered over a sleek black metal card, its edges catching the light like a razor. He slid it forward without preamble. By something, he rasped, voice raw as gravel. Anything. Solange's brows knitted, but she didn't reach for it. The card lay between them like forbidden fruit, no name, no limit, issued by a private bank that served only the ultra-wealthy. Why give such power to a cleaner? Why today? The air felt electrically tense, as though the skyscraper itself held its breath. He expected gratitude, maybe confusion. Instead she simply nodded, placed the card inside her pocket notebook, and asked if she should finish sanitizing the executive washroom before leaving. Her calm neutrality unsettled him more than tears would have. As she turned, Conrad glimpsed a faint tremor in her right hand, quickly stilled when she gripped her card. Questions, uncharacteristic, human questions, pressed against his ribcage. What did she value? What memory might she chase with limitless credit? But the oxygen alarm chirped, dragging him back to statistical reality. Platelet counts, donor registries showing no match for his rare blood disorder, and a countdown he could almost hear ticking in the hush behind her footsteps. By the time the sliding doors hushed shut, the oxygen mask felt heavier, and the black card's absence left a shadow on the wood as dark as dread itself. 3 nights passed before Solange finally produced the card. Rain hammered the subway grates, splashing neon puddles onto worn sneakers as she exited a corner bodega in Little Havana, far from Conrad's mirrored towers. Inside her tote were not diamonds or designer shoes, but 3 modest items. A single sunflower wrapped in paper, a polished walnut picture frame, and a steaming container of arroz con pollo that smelled like Sunday in a kitchen long gone. The clerk had tried to hide his amazement when the terminal approved a purchase by Hale Family Trust, but Solange's shy smile disarmed questions. On the train home, passengers scrolled feeds of celebrities flaunting gold cards, yet none noticed the cleaner who held raw proof that fortunes could orbit ordinary lives. She cupped the meal in her lap, letting warmth seep into chilled fingers, and for a moment imagined her late mother humming over a simmering pot, hips swaying to old boleros. Memory tasted like saffron and lime. When she reached her studio flat, a single window overlooking a graffiti-splashed alley, she placed the sunflower in a chipped vase, slid an old photograph of her mother into the new frame, and spooned rice onto a cracked plate. Across town, Conrad stared at untouched caviar while algorithms scanned blood banks for miracles. Neither knew the other was awake, yet an invisible thread tightened. One flower, one frame, one final meal shared with ghosts. Outside, the storm eased, leaving the city glistening as if rinsed clean for what would happen next. Dawn returned Conrad to his hallway, a marble artery lined with modern art, where he insisted on pacing despite doctors' warnings. The world tilted, veins roaring like a faulty generator, and suddenly the corridor blurred. He collapsed, knees cracking marble, the ventilator tube yanking free. An alarm wailed. Staff farther down the wing froze, but Solange had just clocked in, her cart still by the service elevator. She sprinted, skidding to his side. No screaming, no panic, just swift competence. 2 fingers to carotid, tilt chin, clear airway. In one motion she reattached the oxygen line and started chest compressions perfectly timed, murmuring counts in Spanish under her breath. Security arrived, stunned to see the silent cleaner orchestrating life-saving protocol like a seasoned medic. Paramedics whisked Conrad onto a gurney, yet one firefighter lingered, frowning as Solange relayed vitals with crisp medical jargon. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked. She shrugged, eyes refusing to betray anything. As the elevator doors swallowed Conrad's stretcher, whispers whipped through the staff lounge. "Did you see her? She moved like an ER nurse," but Solange simply retreated, rinsed her hands, and resumed wiping fingerprints from a chrome elevator panel. Though her reflection now flickered with secrets even she hadn't fully faced. At Mercy General, the emergency team ruled out immediate surgery yet demanded fresh blood. Conrad's type ABRH null, vanishing le rare, meant every employee on shift was pricked. Nurses apologetically jabbed Solange's arm while she sat on a folding chair near supply cabinets, still wearing her name badge, facilities support. Routine. Until a lab tech burst through the doors clutching a printout like it was radioactive. "Perfect match," she whispered to the attending physician. "Impossible odds." The doctor's brow creased. He cross-checked barcodes, patient IDs, then stared at Solange as though lightning had cracked indoors. Statistically, fewer than a dozen compatible donors existed worldwide, and one had just mopped Conrad Hale's floors. Shivers coursed down Solange's spine, not from fear of needles but from an echo of her mother's final cough, the rasped confession. "You were chosen, mi cielo. Never forget your real name." Security escorted her to a private room for further testing. Yet the real examination now unfolded behind her eyes. Who was she really? And why did fate drag her into the orbit of a dying titan whose blood pulsed same as hers? Outside, city sirens faded under morning traffic. But inside Mercy General a different alarm had begun. One that would rewrite the ledger of legacy and debt for the Hale dynasty forever. Solange sat alone in a consultation cubicle that smelled faintly of antiseptic and overbrewed coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed as Dr. Malik slid a slim manila folder across the desk. No small talk, just solemn eyes that said brace yourself. The folder held printouts from the hospital's rapid DNA crossmatch, adoption papers sealed 29 years earlier, and a grainy scan of a neonatal footprint card stamped, Baby Hale. Her fingertips trembled as she traced the smudged ink arches that matched her own feet now stuffed in service-issue sneakers. A memory detonated. Her mother wheezing in a hospice ward, clutching a fraying rosary, whispering, "You have more family than you know, mi cielo. Find the name Conrad if life ever rips you apart." Life, it seemed, had not merely ripped but rearranged her entire fabric. Dr. Malik's voice filtered through the roar in her ears. "Legally, we can't compel you to donate, but your match is unprecedented." Solange closed the folder, pulse sprinting. Outside the glass wall, Conrad lay pale beneath ICU monitors, a titan toppled by frailty. Rage, sorrow, and a flicker of awe braided together inside her chest. The man whose empire signed her paychecks was the same man whose blood echoed her own heartbeat. She slid the folder back. "I need time," she murmured, standing before the floor steadied beneath her. The doctor nodded, though his eyes begged, "Please hurry." Solange exited through a service staircase, the folder's revelations pounding her skull in sync with each footfall. By the time she reached street level, the city's noon bustle felt like a foreign planet where her last name had just changed without consent. And nothing fit except the cold certainty that destiny had set its hook long before she ever polished Conrad Hale's office glass. Conrad awoke later that evening to a sterile quiet broken only by telemetry beeps, and an absence he felt like phantom pain. Solange's utilitarian totes still rested on a visitor chair, sunflower wilting, but she herself had vanished. For the first time in decades, Conrad experienced panic unbuffered by assistants or board counsel. He ordered his driver to canvass employee addresses, his security chief to scour subway cameras. Each directive rasped through cracked lips, but desperation injected adrenaline richer than any Ford drip. Find her, whatever it costs. Meanwhile, the Hale Group's crisis team assembled contingencies, a charter jet to fly in rare blood donors from Sweden, a blank check deal with a biotech startup synthesizing artificial plasma. Yet every solution paled against the blunt math Dr. Malik delivered. Without an immediate compatible transfusion, Conrad's failing marrow would shut down within weeks. The board fretted about stock prices. Conrad's thoughts tunneled elsewhere, toward a silent cleaner whose absence felt less like employee truancy and more like cosmic judgment. Each hour she stayed gone lengthened into a reckoning he could neither bribe nor bully. As twilight bled into the ward, Conrad reached for the black card now returned by security, turning it over like a talisman. He wondered if she'd used it, if any purchase might offer a breadcrumb to her whereabouts. But the banking portal showed only modest charges, a flower, a picture frame, a meal. Humble choices from a limitless menu. The austerity struck him harder than any auditor's report. Money might impress the world, but it had never been the currency she valued. Now, lying beneath sterile sheets, he began to suspect the true cost of a life spent investing in everything except human connection. 50 miles away, Solange sat cross-legged on the warped hardwood floor of a rented attic room above a defunct bar, clutching her mother's last letter. The paper, softened by years in a keepsake tin, smelled faintly of lavender and pen ink. By flickering candlelight she reread the lines she'd long memorized. Asterisk, he was powerful, frightened, and surrounded by wolves. I had to protect you from that world. Asterisk, the letter never named Conrad directly, only the man who loved me yet feared his own shadow. Solange's childhood had been a patchwork of foster homes until Carmen Alvarez, a semi-retired nurse, adopted her at 13. Carmen taught her clinical first aid, Spanish lullabies, and the dignity of quiet service. Yet questions about her biological father burrowed like splinters. Now answers had arrived uninvited, and they cut deeper than mystery ever did. Rain drummed the tin roof, syncopating with memories, Carmen coughing into blood-specked tissues, urging Solange to chase scholarships instead of grief. The night Carmen died, leaving a locket inscribed with coordinates that pointed to Hale Tower. Solange had applied for the janitorial opening not for proximity to power but for closure. Planning perhaps to confront, maybe to forgive, definitely to understand. She had not predicted a terminal diagnosis that made her very veins a bargaining chip. Staring at a Polaroid of herself as a toddler, curls framing crescent moon eyes identical to Conrad's. She weighed ethics against abandonment. Do I save the man who unknowingly let me grow up fatherless? Thunder answered with stone-shattering force, rattling the window pane. Solange folded the letter, slipped the black card inside as though sealing a pact, and exhaled a decision sharp enough to change lineage, legacy, and leverage in one calculated move. Morning smothered the city in low clouds when Solange strode into Hale Tower. Not in uniform but in civilian slate-gray slacks and a fitted trench that amplified every step's intent. Security staff recognized her yet hesitated. The badge reader still cleared her. HR hadn't processed her absence into termination. She bypassed the executive floor's waiting area, ignoring gasps from assistants. Conrad's door stood ajar as if expecting consequences. Inside, he reclined in a motorized hospital bed, pallor matching starched pillows. When their gazes locked, the room thickened with unspoken history. Solange closed the door with a soft click that sounded louder than a gavel. No greetings, no pleasantries. She placed the black card on his tray table like evidence. You don't get to die yet, she said, her tone even, almost gentle yet edged with flint. Conrad's jaw twitched, whether from fear, guilt, or the painkillers wearing thin, she couldn't tell. Silence hung, humming like live wire. Eyes never leaving his, she listed terms, her chosen surgical team, non-disclosure protections for her identity, a trust fund redirected to a neighborhood clinic Carmen had dreamt of opening, and most jarring to Conrad, joint ownership papers granting her majority share in Hale Group upon his recovery. Each clause landed like a gavel strike. When she finished, she slid a pen beside the documents. I'll provide the blood, she concluded, but legacy is no longer yours alone. Conrad's fingers hovered above the pen, trembling. Years of boardroom brinkmanship had prepared him for hostile takeovers, yet none as personal or poetic as this. He signed. It was less a surrender than an acknowledgement that power, like blood, circulates best when shared or demanded by a daughter he never knew he'd fathered. Hours later, in the hush before surgery, Conrad requested Solange remain. She stood by the observation glass, arms folded, while nurses prepped his central line. The anesthesiologist's calm directives mingled with the slow beep of cardiac monitors. Conrad motioned weakly for her to lean closer. When she did, his confession spilled in ragged breaths. He had met her mother, Marisol Alvarez, during a relief mission after a hurricane leveled coastal clinics. They fell in urgent love. His own father, Hale patriarch and ruthless empire builder, viewed Marisol's poverty as a liability. Threats followed: disinheritance, smear campaigns, even counterfeit birth-death certificates to erase paternity. By the time Conrad buckled, Marisol had vanished, terrified for her unborn child. I searched, he croaked, tears welling. Every investigator, every database. But they scrubbed you from my world. The monitors spiked as emotion tangled with frail physiology. Solange's throat tightened at the image of a younger Conrad tearing apart ledgers while invisible enemies tightened nooses of misinformation. Yet sympathy was tempered by decades of absence. Intentions don't stitch childhood wounds, she whispered. He nodded, oxygen cannula hissing. Let me spend whatever time I have making amends, he pleaded. She didn't promise forgiveness, only that the operation would proceed. Redemption would be measured not in apologies but in actionable change. Outside, clouds parted, casting a beam of sunlight onto the sterile floor as though the universe paused to witness a dynasty pivot on a single fragile intimacy. The surgical team wheeled him away, leaving Solange staring at her reflection in the glass. For the first time she saw not a cleaner, not even a secret heiress, but the embodiment of leverage her mother could only dream of wielding. And the story, hers, his, theirs, was just reaching its most critical incision point. Conrad signed where she pointed, but corporate machinery grinds slow even when death hurries. The contract had to withstand litigation from hawk-eyed board members, so Solange arranged a midnight summit in the tower's vacant auditorium, just her, Conrad's bedridden presence on a rolling gurney, and the in-house counsel whose fountain pen seemed to sweat ink. LED exit signs cast eerie red on the polished stage while clauses were read aloud. 51% voting stock transferred into a joint trust. A 10-year irrevocable endowment for Carmen Alvarez Free Health Clinic, non-disclosure on Solange's lineage until she chose otherwise, veto power over any sale of Hale Group assets that jeopardized worker pensions. Conrad's breathing hitched at each stipulation, pride smarting under morphine, but he nodded. When the lawyer finally pushed the last page across the collapsible table, Solange signed with steady flourish, reclaiming the pen as if sealing a blood pact. The auditorium lights snapped back on, revealing rows of empty seats, silent witnesses to dynastic realignment. As orderlies wheeled Conrad toward pre-op, he whispered, "Thank you for giving me something to fight for." Solange didn't reply. Gratitude could wait until his heartbeat wasn't a ticking auction clock. Behind them, the lead counsel lingered, eyeing the newly inked signatures like bullion bars, calculating who in the upper echelons would view this night as salvation and who would label it coup. Outside, rain turned to sleet, shattering against glass. But inside the unheated auditorium, a warmer storm had settled. The overdue collision of power inherited and power earned. Surgical Suite 7 became a theater where mortality played director and audience at once. From behind a panoramic window, Solange stood motionless, palms pressed to cool glass, watching two teams work in tandem. Hematology harvested her marrow. Cardiothoracic specialists rebuilt Conrad's failing heart valves using cultured tissue seeded with her donor cells. Cameras for medical journals hovered overhead, their gyroscopic arms eerily graceful, filming what textbooks would call a miracle of compatibility. Yet the monitor's steady bap-bap of Solange's pulse threatened to drown out the orchestral whir of ventilators because each red milliliter traveling tubing toward Conrad felt like a bridge she could never torch afterward. Nurses stitched silenced memories into sterile drapes. Her mother's lullabies, the unforgiven years, the hurricane that broke two lives apart until the smell of cauterized vessels jolted her back to now. A wall display tracked elapsed time, hour 3, then 4, then 5. At the moment the lead surgeon announced graft integration, Solange exhaled for the first time since the incision. Conrad's vitals climbed uneven stairs but stayed within green bands. On the final suture, the surgical lights dimmed to recovery mode. A nurse handed Solange a warmed blanket and murmured, "He's stable, Ms. Alvarez Hale." The hyphen sliced her identity in half yet welded it too. She draped the blanket around her shoulders like a mantle and allowed herself to imagine a future hour when the man on that table might wake to sunlight and to the debt only love can repay. Conrad surfaced from anesthesia into a dawn lit pink by smog and possibility. His first sight, Solange seated near the window, profile traced by rising glow, sunflower now tucked behind her ear like a badge of quiet rebellion. No smile, but her eyelids softened, the kind of permission that says speak if you must. He tried, voice rasp, a sandpaper whisper, still here. She nodded once. Vitals look good, she answered, tone as clinical as any nurse but warming at the edges. A long pause filled with the beep 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 of second chances. Then she rose, set a sealed binder on his overbed table, corporate orientation documents for a majority shareholder, color-coded tabs marking suspect subsidiaries, and said, physical rehab starts in 48 hours. Corporate rehab starts now. He managed a weak laugh that turned into a cough. She adjusted the bed, handed him water, and the room's fluorescent hum retreated behind something almost tender. But tenderness didn't linger. A text pinged Solange's phone, unknown number, single line, they'll never let you keep the throne. She pocketed the device without reaction, though Conrad saw her jaw set like rebar. Enemies, he croaked. She met his gaze. Yours. Ours, now. Rest. With that she stepped into the hall where board members paced like vipers awaiting feeding time. Nurses noted the uptick in his heart rate, but Conrad felt strangely alive. Challenges, after all, were the currency in which he'd always thrived. Only this time his fortune wasn't stock options, it was a daughter who refused to let empire trump empathy. By week's end, news of the Hale Trust restructuring leaked to financial press like gasoline meets spark. Headlines screamed cleaner becomes majority shareholder and * dynasty in freefall. * The board convened an emergency session under chandelier glare. Marble table gleaming like a surgical tray. Solange entered flanked by pro bono labor lawyers and 2 factory floor foremen she'd invited as stakeholder observers. Suits stiffened. Acting chairwoman Lydia Trent deployed icy courtesy. We appreciate your unique perspective, Ms. Alvarez. Solange replied, It's Alvarez Hale? Per filings you should have already read. Then slid a dossier across the table detailing offshore tax shelters, wage theft allegations, and environmental violations buried during Conrad's father's reign. Gasps fluttered like crows. Clean house, she said. Or the next press release will. Some directors blanched, others silently calculated odds of siding with her ascendant power. Conrad, still pale but mobile with a cane, appeared via video, surprising everyone by backing her ultimatum. Legacy is stewardship, he declared. Vote accordingly. When the count closed, 8 for reform, 3 abstentions, 1 walkout, the Hale Group officially pivoted from predator to penitent. Outside in the atrium, analysts peppered Solange with questions. She blanked the noise by focusing on the balcony where union reps waited, holding blueprints for clinic expansions funded by the new endowment. Somewhere in the crowd Lydia Trent watched, phone already dialing private equity allies, eyes promising this war was far from over. But for the first time since her mother's death, Solange felt the scales of power tilt toward justice, however briefly balanced. That night Solange returned to her apartment, same cramped studio, but world unrecognizable. She set a box on the table, inside, duplicate keys to the corporate jet she'd refused, a stack of unsigned dividend checks, and the black card she no longer needed. She removed the wilting sunflower from her hair, trimmed its stem, and nestled it beside the framed photo of her mother now occupying pride of place above a repaired shelf. Next she slid an envelope addressed to Conrad under the frame. A letter she'd written on cafeteria napkins during his surgery. It read, * blood isn't debt, but it is responsibility. Earn tomorrow. She was about to tape the clinic's architectural renderings next to it when another message pinged. A single digital photo of an unsigned proxy certificate and a caption. *U1 round 1. But storms return. *No sender ID. She exhaled, feeling the apartment shrink against the enormity of challenges ahead. Boardroom sabotage, lawsuit landmines, and the deeper work of repairing abandonment's scar tissue. Yet in that flickering lamplight, surrounded by simple things, a flower, a frame, a whisper of hope, she understood that power wielded without purpose is noise, and quiet truth is its sharpest antidote. Tomorrow she'd face corporate hydras. Tonight she stood barefoot on creaking wood, letting victory and vigilance share the same fragile breath, while outside the city muttered like a restless beast, still deciding whether it loved her ascent or feared it. 3 weeks into Conrad's rehabilitation, the penthouse gym became his proving ground. Physical therapists coached while Solange watched through the glass, her tablet vibrating with alerts of market volatility, triggered by rumors of a hostile takeover. Sweat dripped like penance down Conrad's temples as he squeezed a resistance band, but the real strain lay in his trembling voice. "They're bleeding the stock to force a fire sale." Solange scrolled. Shell Corporation's purchasing Hale Group shares through dark pools. Volume spikes timed to smears about her illegitimate ascent. The source? A Cayman-based fund fronted by Lydia Trent's college roommate. Corporate war had moved from boardroom to bloodstream. Conrad steadied himself on the parallel bars. "We can't let them gut pensions just to spite us." Solange's reply cut through the hiss of treadmills. "Then we pivot faster than they can short us." Before she could outline strategy, the fire alarm blared code 3. Staff hustled to stairwells, but security feeds on Solange's tablet flashed an anomaly. A server room door forced open, smoke but no flames, drives ripped out. Data theft masquerading as sabotage. She handed Conrad a walkie-talkie and sprinted for the freight elevator. In the sub-basement she found racks still humming. One bay gutted, fiber cables dangling like severed arteries. On the floor, a single calling card. A red business envelope stamped with a tiny Ouroboros. Inside, a USB drive and a printed note. "Your blood can't cleanse every mess." Footsteps echoed. She pocketed the evidence, heart thundering louder than any klaxon. Up in the gym, Conrad forced himself to standing without rails, watching smoke curl past skyscraper windows, realizing this was no mere takeover. It was a purge, and the target wasn't just the company. It was the fragile redemption he'd only begun to earn. The next morning, before dawn had warmed the skyline, Solange convened an emergency all-hands in the Hale Tower atrium. Janitors, coders, forklift drivers in steel-toe boots, even cafeteria staff clutching half-finished muffins. News cameras milled outside, thirsty for spectacle. On a makeshift dais of shipping pallets, she connected her phone to the lobby's jumbo video wall and exposed the overnight breach. Screen caps of missing payroll databases, pension fund ledgers frozen mid-transfer, and metadata linking the attack to Trent's Cayman fund. Gasps rippled like dominoes. Solange met their eyes. "This company was built on your labor. Anyone stealing from you is stealing from me." She raised the red envelope. "And I bite back." The union president, a burly man named Ortiz, stepped forward, fist pressed to heart. "We've got your 6. Cameras flashed as employees erupted into applause that thundered up the marble walls. Across town, Lydia watched live coverage in a private club, champagne glass trembling at the optics nightmare. The cleaner heiress flanked by the rank and file, a modern David arming an army of Goliaths. She dialed her lawyer, file an injunction, block her authority on grounds of fiduciary misconduct. But the lawyer hesitated. Courts rarely side against a workforce unified so publicly. Lydia slammed the phone, palm stinging. If legal weapons stalled, she'd shift to dirtier ammunition. Her eyes drifted to a framed photo of her own father, once steamrolled by Conrad's empire. Revenge tasted metallic on her tongue, a flavor she'd savored too long to spit out now. She poured fresh champagne, steeling herself. If Solange wanted a bloodline war, Lydia would oblige. Starting with the same weapon Carmen Alvarez once used, truth twisted until it crippled. That afternoon, Solange toured the dilapidated warehouse slated to become the Carmen Alvarez Free Health Clinic. Engineers outlined seismic retrofits while community kids chalked murals on cracked concrete. Hope seeped through graffiti like seedlings in asphalt. Halfway through, Ortiz jogged over, phone buzzing. "We caught a contractor bribed to delay permits," he said, showing texts from a burner number promising kickbacks for indefinite holdups. Lydia's fingerprints again. Rage simmered, but Solange had learned from Carmen's nurse's station calm, triage first, fury later. She pocketed the phone, told Ortiz, document everything, then knelt beside children sketching a sunrise over the clinic entrance. One little girl asked, "Are you the lady who fixes grown-ups?" Solange's throat constricted. She answered, "I try." The child handed her a chalk stick. Together they colored the rising sun bright, though clouds threatened overhead. Flashbacks flickered. Carmen humming while bandaging flood victims, whispering that healing isn't just mending wounds but building places where pain doesn't start. Solange stood, chalk dust on her slacks like war paint. She drafted a press release on her phone. Hale Group doubles clinic budget. Invites city inspectors to live stream every permit check. Transparency as armor. Yet even as she hit send, a push alert appeared. Anonymous source alleges new Hale heir covered up medical malpractice at previous job. Her pulse spiked. She'd never been a nurse, but misinformation spreads faster than fact. She spun to Ortiz. "They're weaponizing lies." He cracked a weary grin. "Then we'll weaponize truth louder." Cameras already zoomed, catching determination etch across her face. Somewhere Lydia watched again, lips curling. Phase 2 deployed. By month's end, Conrad marched into the boardroom without a cane, suit tailored narrower to his leaner frame, donor marrow fueling renewed resolve. Reporters lined corridors. Inside, directors whispered, half expecting him to retake the helm and sideline Solange. Instead, he clicked a remote. The screens displayed forensic timelines of the data theft, Cayman money trails, and footage of Lydia's fixer bribing the permit officer courtesy of the USB drive's honeypot tracker. Lydia's complexion drained. Conrad's voice resonated, steady. "We can weather profit dips, but not dishonor." Effective immediately, Miss Trent, you are removed pending investigation. Security approached. Lydia's veneer shattered into rage. "You'll regret elevating a maid to monarch," she spat at Solange. Solange met her stare, eyes volcanic calm. "We regret underestimating janitors," she replied. Lydia was escorted out, cameras devouring every tremor. The remaining directors turned to Conrad, awaiting old guard reassurance. He gestured to Solange. "Your chairwoman." Gasps again, but fatigue of scandal made acquiescence easier. They voted, the motion passed unanimous. Conrad exhaled, pride and penitence fused. Solange took the head seat, once his father's throne, feeling its weight, not as triumph but as testament. She tapped the gavel. First agenda: restore pensions, audit environmental compliance, and publish every future meeting transcript online. Murmurs ranged from approval to terror. Change had a new rhythm, and it marched to the heartbeat of a bloodline long ignored. Night cloaked the skyline in obsidian gloss when Solange and Conrad stepped onto the tower's rooftop helipad, city lights flickering like neural impulses. They'd planned a quiet breath above the noise, but a drone hovered, broadcasting live to a jumbotron in Times Square, courtesy of Ortiz and the PR team, turning transparency into theater. Conrad chuckled, wind whipping his silver hair. Hard to hide now. Solange gazed over neon arteries stretching beyond sight. Hiding built these shadows. We flood them with light, or we become what we fought. She handed him the black card, its chip now deactivated. Symbolic retirement, she said. He flicked it over the edge, it spun, disappearing into night. Suddenly her phone buzzed with an encrypted alert: court summons, Trent seeking injunction via a federal judge known for corporate leanings. Hearing set for 48 hours. Conrad sighed, but Solange's lips curved into a strategist's grin. Good. Court is public. Cameras roll. Let's make this the trial of transparency. She texted Ortiz, mobilize workers, livestream everything. Lightning crackled over distant river, foreshadow flashing silver. Conrad rested a hand on her shoulder. Whatever comes, I'm here. She nodded, heartbeat steady. The city below throbbed, a living organism awaiting its next plot twist. And in that charged rooftop silence, father and daughter understood the real antidote was never just blood, it was two generations finally choosing the same side of history. Ready to inject truth straight into the veins of an empire that once mistook power for immunity. The courthouse steps resembled a festival of reckoning when dawn splashed pale gold across their marble rise. Camera cranes swung overhead, capturing a mosaic of hard hats, cafeteria aprons, and email stiff fingers, all raised in cardboard signs. Our blood, our share, justice is clean work. Solange walked the gauntlet, flanked by Conrad, his gait slow but unassisted, and Ortiz, whose union jacket bore fresh chalk from the clinic mural. Reporters volleyed questions: illegitimate heiress? Corporate hostage? But Solange paused only once, turning toward a middle-aged receptionist in the crowd who clasped a homemade banner reading Carmen's dream saved my son. Their eyes locked, and grief braided with gratitude in silent acknowledgement. Inside, fluorescent corridors smelled of coffee and polished brass. Walls vibrated with the hum of whispered legalese. Lydia Trent arrived minutes later in a designer trench, flanked by 3 attorneys whose lapels shone like armor. She swept past Conrad, dropping a hissed aside. Let's see how transparency feels under oath. The bailiff called them into courtroom for a wood-paneled and solemn, a modern coliseum where paper, not swords, decided fates. As the gallery filled, Solange inhaled deeply, tasting the collective breath of janitors and executives alike. Carmen had taught her that hospitals are built on shared oxygen. Today justice would be, too. She gripped Conrad's hand. A brief spark of family forged in crisis, and stepped to counsel table, ready to argue not just ownership but the moral geometry of legacy itself. Judge Brennan, silver-browed and reputedly allergic to theatrics, opened with procedural monotone that belied the circus atmosphere. Lydia's lead counsel rose first, brandishing a glossy binder titled Evidence of Fiduciary Negligence by Ms. Alvarez-Hale. He painted Solange as an emotional usurper, unqualified, impulsive, a threat to shareholder value. Each barb was punctuated by slides of stock dips and social media memes mocking the maid with the machete. Yet when he displayed a supposed malpractice report from Solange's nursing days, she calmly leaned to her attorney, who tapped a key. The courtroom screens refreshed to reveal the same document's metadata, creation date, 2 weeks ago, author tag. An IP registered to Trent Global Holdings. Gasps echoed. Solange's counsel then cued surveillance from the server room breach. The fixer caught pocketing drives, the red envelope, the Cayman Fund's money laundering trail. Lydia's complexion shifted from porcelain to ash. For the coup de grace, Conrad requested to address the court. Voice steady, he confessed past obliviousness, acknowledging that negligence isn't just acts committed but truths avoided. If leadership means anything, he said, it's repaying debts we didn't know we owed. Silence followed, thick as courtroom dust. Judge Brennan's gavel finally cut through. Motion to enjoin Ms. Alvarez-Hale's authority is denied with prejudice. Preliminary findings suggest malicious intent by Ms. Trent. Marshal, secure the defendant's passport. Lydia bolted upright, accusation sputtering, but steel cuffs clicked before syllables cohered. The gallery erupted, cheers, tears, the clatter of keyboards feeding headlines. Solange exhaled a tremor's worth of relief, yet victory tasted bittersweet, tinged with the knowledge that systems crumble slowly even when judgment falls swiftly. Outside, Courthouse Plaza blazed with midday sun and jubilation. Conrad descended the steps first, leaning on Ortiz's steady arm. Reporters swarming like bees drunk on scandal. A black SUV edged the curb. Company transport to whisk them back to Hale Tower. But as Conrad reached for the door, hydraulic fluid spilled beneath, hissing on asphalt. A mechanic's instinct flickered in Ortiz's eyes. He yanked Conrad back just as the vehicle's rear axle collapsed with a metallic groan. Panic rippled. Security shoved bystanders clear. Solange knelt, fingertips skimming the glossy puddle. Sabotage precise and lethal. Brake lines slashed to snap under weight. She scanned the rooftops, catching a glimpse of a figure in charcoal suit disappearing behind a ventilation shaft. Lydia's fixer, now freelance and feral. Sirens approached. Detectives converged. Conrad's pulse raced, but Solange steadied him, voice low. They're cornered animals. We stay visible, safety in the spotlight. She motioned Ortiz to mount a makeshift podium of camera crates. Microphones thrust forward, she declared, attempts on our lives won't deter reform. Starting tomorrow, every Hale transport will undergo union-supervised inspections. Safety, from boardroom to loading dock, is non-negotiable. The crowd roared approval, their echo bouncing between courthouse columns. Somewhere in the throng, a teenager live-streamed commentary raw. Yo, the cleaner queen just saved the CEO again. The phrase ricocheted across social media within minutes, galvanizing hashtags that pushed stock tickers upward despite volatility. Amid flashing bulbs and forensic tape, Solange realized survival itself had become part of the story, and stories, once viral, rarely die quietly. The following week, Judge Brennan issued a full injunction against Trent Global, freezing its assets pending criminal inquiry. Hale Group's share price rebounded on a gust of public goodwill, yet Solange refused champagne toasts. Instead, she and Conrad spent evenings poring over decades-old personnel files, flagging workers wrongfully dismissed during the elder Hale's reign. Letters of apology drafted, restitution packages calculated, phone calls made. Some former employees hung up, others wept. One night an email arrived from a warehouse foreman fired 20 years earlier for unionizing. Asterisk, your father cost me my pension, but your clinic just saved my grandson's heart. Debt settled. Asterisk, Conrad read it twice, tears dotting the keyboard. Healing, he discovered, was messy math, loss subtracted, restitution added, grace multiplying in unexpected margins. Meanwhile, Solange greenlit the clinic's groundbreaking ceremony, inviting city brass, healthcare NGOs, and every Hale staffer past and present. Media RSVP'd in droves. Opposition voices lingered, anonymous op-eds warning shareholders to brace for woke bankruptcy, but quarterly projections, buoyed by a surge in ethically minded investors, told aloud. Our tale? At dawn on dedication day, Conrad stood before a mirror, tying a sea green tie Carmen once gifted him during hurricane relief. His hands shook. Solange stepped behind, steadying the knot. Their eyes met in reflection. No titles, no contracts, just blood acknowledging blood. Ready? She asked. He nodded. For the first time since his diagnosis, the word felt less like bravado and more like truth. Sunlight spilled through newly installed skylights of the Carmen Alvarez Free Health Clinic, painting the fresh white walls in hopeful gold. Children's murals stretched along the entrance hall, sunrises, stethoscopes, and a towering figure labeled Clean Warrior. Solange laughed softly at the likeness, mop in one hand, gavel in the other. She took the stage, microphone squealing once before settling. Faces filled the courtyard, factory line workers, suited analysts, neighborhood abuelas clutching prayer beads, and live stream audiences beyond counting. She began, voice steady but threaded with emotion. My mother believed healing starts before illness. Today we open doors to preventative care, mental health support, and dignity accessible to all. Applause thundered, but she lifted a hand for quiet. This isn't charity. It's restitution. And it's only the beginning. Conrad stepped forward, cane forgotten backstage, to present Ortiz with framed stock certificates granting the workers' trust a permanent seat on the board. The union president's voice cracked thanking him, cameras catching tears reflecting skylight. A gospel choir launched into Lean on Me, voices soaring over city sirens beyond clinic walls. When the song settled, Solange delivered the final beat. If you believe justice belongs in boardrooms and break rooms alike, like this video, subscribe to our channel, share it with everyone you love, and drop your lesson in the comments below. Let's write the next chapter together. The crowd echoed, phones raised, hearts lifted. Somewhere in that sea of hands, a sunflower bobbed above the heads, its yellow petals bright against urban gray. Solange spotted it, smile widening. The story that began with a black card and a quiet cleaner now unfolded under wide-open skylights, inviting the world to keep turning pages she vowed would never again be written in the dark. 2 months after the ribbon cutting, the clinic's hallways hummed with life. Toddlers clutching free vitamin packs, veterans scheduling therapy, single parents learning how to read blood pressure charts. Yet upstairs in a glass conference room, Solange faced the first quarterly shareholders briefing of her reign. Cameras streamed, analysts perched like hawks, and a neon ticker in the corner flashed breaking news about yet another company accused of wage theft. Conrad opened with a confession the old board would have buried. Past negligence cost lives and livelihoods. Today we quantify that cost in dollars and in vows. Gasps rustled, but he pressed on, outlining the reparations fund and modestly trimmed executive bonuses that financed it. Solange followed, voice steady as rainfall, unveiling a 5-year plan to convert every Hale manufacturing site to green energy while guaranteeing no layoffs, a feat accomplished by retraining grants shepherded through the Workers' Trust. Stock predictions wobbled, then rallied as socially responsible funds poured in. One analyst asked whether transparency still made them vulnerable to hostile actors. Solange smiled, slid a QR code onto the screen, and said, "Scan it, real-time audits, open source." When the analyst complied, the dashboard popped up on every viewer's phone, numbers updating live. The room erupted in whispered astonishment, Twitter feeds lit like sparklers. Afterward, Conrad rested a hand on Solange's shoulder in the elevator, pride soft in his eyes. "I spent decades buying silence," he admitted. "You turned the quiet into a megaphone." She held his gaze, the weight of leadership less lonely now that it echoed with voices once scrubbed from the balance sheet. Justice wheels kept grinding. Lydia Trent, denied bail after the failed sabotage, faced sentencing in a packed courtroom where victims testified via livestream. Ortiz described pension raids. A laid-off chemist spoke of unsafe shortcuts she'd been ordered to approve. When Conrad took the stand, he didn't gloat. Instead, he detailed his own failings that allowed Lydia's schemes to flourish. The judge, moved by candor yet bound by law, delivered 10 years plus restitution. Cameras pivoted to Lydia, mascara streaking, as she locked eyes with Solange seated in the front row. The moment stretched like an unspoken treaty. Two daughters of powerful fathers, both casualties of unchecked ambition, diverging now on separate paths. That evening, Conrad drove Solange past the prison gates, not to revel but to reflect. "I could have been behind those bars," he said quietly. Solange replied, "Accountability isn't a destination, it's how we travel." Streetlights carved alternating bands of gold and shadow across the windshield, and for the first time they spoke about Carmen without tears, her laughter when hurricane winds rattled shutters, her stubborn insistence that people are more salvageable than property. As the prison disappeared in the rearview mirror, Conrad exhaled a weight he'd carried for 3 decades. Headlights traced the road ahead, illuminating a future neither captivity nor vengeance could derail. Saturday dawn found Solange back in Little Havana, sneakers dusty from broken sidewalk tiles she once swept in anonymity. At the corner bodega, the same clerk who'd run the black card for Arroz con Pollo grinned and slid a steaming container across the counter. House treat now, no card required. Outside, neighborhood kids crowded around a muralist painting Solange's likeness beside Carmen's, mother and daughter framed by swirling sunflowers. She knelt, inviting the children to dip brushes in bright acrylic and add their own handprints. Each print felt like a heartbeat pressed onto concrete, a collective pact that legacy thrives only when shared. Later she met with scholarship recipients at the community center, telling them how a cleaner became a chairwoman without surrendering her honesty. A shy teen raised her hand, asking, "What if the system still tries to erase us?" Solange answered, "Then we write our names louder and help each other hold the pen." Applause rippled. That night, from her studio's single window, she watched rooftop antennas catch the sunset like metallic flowers, remembering how loneliness once filled this room. Now the space overflowed with blueprints, clinic patient stats, and letters addressed Madam Chair. She placed Carmen's repaired locket on the sill, the coordinates inside no longer a mystery but a map of conquered fear. Soft city noises lulled her to sleep, heart finally beating at a pace that felt like belonging. Autumn's first chill ushered in the Hale Group's inaugural Unity Gala, no ballroom glitz, but an open-air festival on the factory grounds where engines once roared unchecked. Food truck aromas mingled with violin strings, and massive LED screens projected a live documentary edited from employee-shot phone clips. Solange stopping the board's vote montage, Conrad rehabbing alongside assembly line workers, Ortiz coaching interns. Donor tents doubled as mobile blood donation centers, symbolically replenishing the same lifeblood that had saved Conrad. As dusk deepened, solar-powered lanterns assembled by apprentices in a new green tech program lit the crowd in warm constellations. Conrad surprised everyone by stepping onto the plywood dance floor, extending his hand to Solange as the band struck up an old bolero. Laughter and cheers swelled while they moved in cautious circles. His steps stiffer, hers guiding, but both radiant. Drone cameras captured the swirl, streaming to tens of thousands watching online. Comments flooded in. Real-life redemption arc, money well spent, cleaner queen for president. When the song ended, Solange addressed the gathering, voice amplified under the star-kissed sky. An empire is only as strong as its humblest story. Tonight we dance on ground once soaked in overtime tears, and we promise never to forget whose feet built this floor. Fireworks burst, their reflection shining in safety goggles worn by technicians who had wired the launch. Hope felt tangible enough to touch. Later, in the quiet of her apartment, Solange watered a sunflower now thriving in a recycled paint bucket beside the window. The photo of Carmen and a younger Conrad, scanned, restored, and framed, sat beneath it, the black card tucked behind like a relic from another life. She opened her laptop to schedule the next clinic expansion meeting, but notifications pinged nonstop. Likes, shares, subscription milestones crossing 6 figures. She hit record and spoke softly. If my story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe for more journeys from the shadows to the spotlight, share this video with anyone who needs proof that truth is the best inheritance. And drop in the comments the moment you realized your own power. Let's keep each other brave. She ended the recording, uploaded it, then closed the laptop, letting evening breeze flutter the curtain. Street sounds drifted up, laughter, distant horns, the rhythmic thump of someone's stereo, yet beneath it all, a deeper hush sang, the silence of secrets finally told. Solange leaned back, breath steady, and watched the sunflower tilt toward the moonlight. Somewhere, algorithms churned, stories spread, and hearts recalibrated to the idea that antidotes to greed and grief sometimes wear janitor blues, wield chalk and courage, and bloom brightest after sweeping the darkest corners. If you've watched this far, please kindly show us some love by liking the video, sharing and commenting your thoughts in the comments section, and don't forget subscribe to the channel. Your love means a lot to us.